women have been torn from their lives, taken from their families, and sold into slavery. They are victims of a multi-billion-dollar international business that traffics hundreds of thousands of women a year. Tonight, Frontline takes a hidden camera look deep inside the new global sex trade.
Our girls are in high demand since they're quite pretty and easily accessible. It's a very profitable business.
Frontline also follows one man who's determined to get his wife back before she's lost for good to the world of the traffickers. It's an extraordinary journey that raises tough questions about governments around the world, largely indifferent to the traffickers' abuses.
I hadn't encountered much evil in my life. I thought I'd find at least one kind person, or that one of those pimps would set me free.
Odessa, Ukraine, a port town on the Black Sea known for its nightlife and its beautiful women. Under the old Soviet Union, it was a center of organized crime. Now, Odessa has become a major hub for the global sex trade. Women are lured to the port of Odessa from all over the struggling countries of Eastern Europe, with promises of badly needed work abroad. Many are unaware of what the traffickers have in store. The production team has set up cameras here.
We knew if we wanted to get inside a story that we had to be in a place where it was so prevalent that everybody would have an example or know people who are trafficked. And that's what brought us ultimately to Odessa.
Frustrated with an inability to chase the traffickers overseas, the Ukrainian Secret Service has given us a tip about a suspected sex trader who regularly brings girls through here. Across from the port, on the famous Odessa steps, we secretly film as she traffics young women to Turkey. We've been asked to call her Olga.
The Secret Service said that she runs a legitimate business as a cover, and she basically takes women from Moldova and Ukraine to work as domestics in Turkey. And amongst these women are some younger women who she sells to traffickers and pimps in Turkey. We wanted to answer some fundamental questions, like why don't these women run away, and how do they get across borders, and how do they get kidnapped, and how could they really be enslaved, and at this point in history.
Sex trafficking only started with the fall of the Soviet Union, when the borders opened up, and it became much easier for traffickers to find desperate girls with no education, girls that they can fool and persuade them to go abroad.
We watched as Olga settled the girls in for the trip across the Black Sea. Many are destined for the legitimate jobs that Olga has promised. But according to a convicted trafficker who agreed to speak with us, some of these young women are headed for a far worse fate.
The average trafficking ring has 3 to 4 middlemen. The transporter takes her from Ukraine and puts her on a boat. In Turkey, she's transferred to someone else, and she's then sold on to a pimp.
We located 2 women who were trafficked on this same boat 6 months earlier by Olga.
Та женщина, которая нас перевозила в Турцию, продала. Она Паша к нам неплохо относилась. Подходила, спрашивала, как дела, как девчонки, нормально.
I thought I was going to work in a shop. We were told that there are lots of women from Moldova and Russia working there. We were told that we could earn $200 a month. I can't say I was very happy or excited. I worried a bit because we were heading for a foreign country. We hoped everything would be okay.
Turkey has become one of the largest markets for women trafficked from Ukraine and the old Soviet bloc. Its lax visa requirements make it an easy port of entry to Europe and the Middle East for traffickers like Olga.
She got through customs with absolutely no problem. The traffickers who transport these women have a very easy time of it. Because the women know that they're going to be working illegally in the country that they're going to, they actually help the trafficker by lying to the customs officials. At this point, we didn't know exactly what she was going to do. We didn't know where she was going to go. We didn't know what kind of vehicle she would have. All we knew is that she often goes to a cafe and sells the girls. That's what we had heard.
The plan is to keep on Olga's trail in Istanbul and see where the women in her group are taken. The crew's Turkish fixer has a good idea where they're headed.
They're going to Aksaray, that place, Russian district there.
Aksaray is a bustling district in the heart of Istanbul, home to growing numbers of expatriate Soviets. Compared to what they left behind, Aksaray is full of opportunities. But for many young women, Aksaray will be the bitter end to their dreams. Olga leads the team to a notorious spot in Aksaray. This parking lot is an unofficial market for Russian migrant workers. Goods are exchanged, deals are made, legal and illegal workers head to their new employers, and women are sold.
She asked us to wait for a while. Then she approached us and said, "Come with me." We followed her and crossed the road. There were some men at a table outside a cafe. She brought us to those men and said that one of them was the owner of the shop. She told us they were going to drive us to the apartment where we were going to stay. She talked to them in Turkish, took money from them, and counted it. I saw her counting the money. I got scared. She said, "Don't worry, everything is fine. Go with those men. They're good people. Don't worry." We guessed that she was selling us, but we hoped we were wrong. We hoped that we had misunderstood things.
Смотри, деньги хлоп отдали.
Ну ты что, да?
Для меня продал, да?
Вот так же полиция вот стоит, она вот отошла два шага от полиции и продает, не боится ничего.
Не испортили жизнь.
Once trafficked into sexual slavery, the women are quickly put to work to start turning a profit for their new owners.
They brought us to an apartment.
Вечером меня разбудил.
That night, a man woke me up. He told me to get dressed because I was going to work. I asked him, "Why am I going to work now?" He said, "Get dressed and you'll see." He took me to a hotel. It was a nightmare.
Все зависит от того, насколько психика.
Everything depends on the psychological state of the girl.
Если у нее слабая психика, то
If she
она
has a weak
обычно
psyche,
ломается. Вот, то есть ее уговаривают, так сказать,
she usually breaks down and accepts that she'll have to work as a prostitute.
работать с проституткой.
He simply raped me.
Насиловал, я
I screamed and tried to run away.
жестокий такой.
He was so cruel.
Как ложили нас под всех...
They forced us to have sex with different Turkish men.
Издевались татами. Их не играли
They
на
did
них.
whatever they wanted to us.
Journalist Victor Malarek spent 2 years interviewing traffickers and their victims.
People have said to me, well, these girls can run. They can't. They're taken to these apartments and these houses, usually in remote areas, and men come in and break them. And they make her submit to every indignity in front of all the girls, and they beat her and do whatever. And all the other girls fall right into line.
Back at the port of Odessa a few days later, Olga's business is done. The Ukrainian Secret Service says she'll soon return here with a new group of recruits. Officials estimate that hundreds of thousands of women have been trafficked from Ukraine since the fall of the Soviet Union. So many that an office has been set up right at the port to help the victims. Today it's visited by Virel, a man who says his wife was sold into the sex trade.
Куда она выехала?
Она выехала 12 июня из Одессы на теплоходе на Каледонии.
Trafficked on the same ship as Anya and Katerina, her name is Katya.
И жена ваша уехала, я знаю, беременная.
Да.
Какой срок?
Уже почти 5 месяцев. Где-то 4,5, где-то так. Ну да, месяц уже почти пришел.
Она одна уехала.
С ним приехала, с Владом.
А она уехала с Владом. Кто такой Влад?
Знакомый, который продал мою жену.
Katya and Virel met in Odessa, where Virel worked as a bartender. Her nightmare began when an acquaintance of theirs offered to take her to Turkey, where she could buy goods cheaply for her mother's market stall back home.
Basically, an acquaintance of theirs had told him that he was going to Turkey anyway, so he might as well accompany Katya, and he speaks Turkish, and he could just help her and watch over her. And a week after they left for Turkey, Virel got a phone call from this gentleman, Vlad, saying that he had sold his wife for $1,000.
За Катю
For Katya,
мы заплатили
I was paid $1,000.
$1000 США. То есть во столько
That's how they priced Katya at the time.
Катю.
He said, "I've sold your wife." I immediately realized that I shouldn't jump on him. Otherwise, he'd disappear. Like, he wouldn't give me his telephone number, and I would never find him or my wife. I spoke to him nicely.
Почему я позвонил ему?
Why did I phone him?
Совесть замучила, это будет слишком
To say that I felt guilty might sound absurd after what I did.
того, что я сделал. Ну, как ни странно.
However, strange as it may seem, guilt played its part.
Vlad decided to help Virel after learning that the woman he sold Katya to had then resold her to a notoriously violent pimp called Apo.
Апо — это тот человек,
Apo is a person
у которого, если смотреть с общечеловеческой стороны,
without a shred of human decency.
у него святого, в принципе, нет.
He has no principles whatsoever.
Через все. Не глядя на
At
последствия.
times he can be
Вот. Бывает времена,
very cruel.
жесток.
Vlad gave Virel the phone number for Apo, and Virel called, pretending to be Katya's original trafficker.
Я позвонил.
I called Apo and negotiated with him directly to buy her back. I asked him, "What do you want?" girls or money? And he said, money.
Katya was being held in Antalya, Turkey, a tourist town on the Mediterranean. Viorel set up a meeting with Apo at the airport to buy Katya back. He then went to the Turkish police.
They stationed police everywhere in order to nab him. Then I called Apo, and he came.
When they start talking to each other, I understand something went wrong, and either Apo saw a police officer or somebody blew a whistle. Apo got very suspicious, and he jumped in the car and took off.
And that was it. Apo no longer trusted Viorel. Apo assumed that he was being framed by Viorel and that Viorel had called the police.
Viorel now feels that informing the police was a grave mistake.
What can you think of the Turkish police? There were 60 officers involved in a guarded airport with only one entrance and one exit. There's a checkpoint and tons of police, and they let Apo slip away. I'll do anything to get her out of there. Whatever it takes, I don't care. I'd sell my f***ing organs.
Katya's journey into the hands of one of Turkey's most violent sex traffickers began in Moldova, a nation wedged between Romania and Ukraine. Moldova is perhaps the poorest country in Europe. 80% of the population lives below the poverty line. Tiraspol, its second largest city, is a haven for traffickers in arms, drugs, and people. It is also Katya's hometown.
I pushed her to go to Turkey so we could make some money. Some people do manage to make money. It's probably my fault because I encouraged her to go.
When Katya left here a month earlier, her 5-year-old son Ruslan stayed behind with her mother.
Here I am with her 5-year-old child, and I'm 60. I told him that she went to work. What else can I tell a child? That his mother was sold? Imagine. He keeps crying all the time and asking why it's taking her so long to come back. What can I say to him? He's so little. Where's my mama? Where's my mama? What can I tell him?
Katya didn't suspect what kind of plans I had for her in Turkey. How could she suspect? My plan was to keep her in the dark. Katya ended up in a place where I didn't want her to be.
Though one of the smallest countries in Eastern Europe, Moldova has become a leading exporter of women and girls into the global sex trade. Posing as buyers and wearing hidden shirt cameras, the crew set out to see how pervasive human trafficking has become here.
I had a business card that said Exotic Entertainment. I pretended I was a guy from the West who's interested in buying Eastern European girls. From the get-go, it was very plain and simple. Can I buy girls from you? Yes. How much?
Платят 500-600. Это не я получаю. Ну, платят побольше, а я еще посреднику оставляю. Понимаешь, тот человек, который меня отправляет, делает документы.
She got very excited because there she had a brand new opportunity to start selling girls to North America.
Я потом встречаюсь с людьми. Если, допустим, вижу, что она, допустим, вам подойдет по возрасту там и так далее, по внешности, так, шрамов, чтоб не было, да, чтоб ничего не было. А если, допустим, вот как, ну вот этот...
Аппендицит, что ли?
Аппендицит, да. С аппендицитом у меня берут. Я не знаю, я поэтому спрашиваю, я должна все узнать.
Посмотреть девчонок можно будет?
Обязательно. Я сначала сама, я посмотрю, если она вам подойдет, значит, я тут же звоню, приезжаете, смотрите сами. Я же вам не буду каталогички давать, правильно? Я правильно говорю?
So the next step for her is to find those kind of girls for me.
Newspaper ads are often used by recruiters. Some women understand their code for sex work, but a good percentage are fooled by the traffickers.
70% of the girls know exactly where they're going and what they're going for. 20% of them agree to be exotic dancers, but often don't suspect what else might happen to them. And the remaining 10% are totally unaware. In other words, they are brought there under false pretenses.
А на месте забирай паспорт. Забирай паспорт. Прям должны ее встретить. Кто, я не знаю, кто-то будет встречать же. Ну вот, чтобы сразу раз и документики пусть будут. Мы будем говорить здесь, что будут документы при ней, на самом деле забирайте. Не будет спокойно.
Once moved out of Moldova, Ukraine, and the other major source countries, the women's trafficking odyssey begins. For Katya, it's now been 5 weeks in captivity, and all communication with her traffickers has gone dead. Trafficking victims often disappear without a trace. What little we know about what Katya may be enduring is pieced together from those who managed to escape. Today, 23-year-old Tanya is seeing her family for the first time since she was trafficked to the underground brothels of Turkey.
Before this, I hadn't encountered much evil in my life. I couldn't believe places like that actually exist in this world. I thought I'd find at least one kind person, or that one of those pimps would set me free.
When Tanya left home 6 months earlier, she told her daughter that she was going to work abroad to make desperately needed money. The idea came from a woman in town who knew her family was struggling. It's common for the first person in the trafficking chain to know the victim personally.
Anyone who works with people has to understand their psychology. You have to know how to lure someone in. They don't even have money for basic food. So most people try to find work abroad. Once they hear words like abroad or big money, they're hooked.
I started crying. I said that I wanted to go back home to my child. The other girls told me, "We also have children, and we also work, and you'll have to do it too. There's nothing you can do about it." They said they all got there the same way I did. I prayed, asked God to somehow help me get back home.
Virel is now headed back to Turkey to rescue his wife from Apo, the pimp who owns her. This time, without the help of the police.
برا نصف الميدان الحورات برا النجوم تفضل كت الشمس برا ما بقى خير سعادة صحاب برا ما بقى تسجل سكت والطيور
Virel knows this may be his last chance to get Katya back, and all he has is Apo's telephone number.
So we're using his phone, right?
His phone.
Okay.
Apo has a wife named Maria, who is his partner in crime. At their airport meeting 2 weeks earlier, Virel had pretended to be a pimp named Seryoja.
Это Сережа. Может, ты неправильно понял? С Одессы.
Сережа, ты приехал с России, там, с Молдавии, откуда ты приехал, с Украины. Там ты ездил к ментам, сказал, что мы эту Катю украли.
Я не говорил там, что менты...
Не нужны.
Ты меня выслушай правильно, ты меня выслушай правильно. Просто, получается, в ментовку заявила Катина мама в Молдавии. Меня взяли за задницу на Украине. Понимаешь? Вот в чем дело. Им нужна Катя. И у меня есть единственный выход, чтобы не сесть, выкупить ее за деньги. А у вас отвязаться от проблем, чтобы она выехала вообще нахрен с этой страны.
Короче, ты сходи к ментам, скажи там, что ты, мы не виноваты вообще.
Солнце, а как я пойду к ментам сейчас? Ты что?
Она твоя любимая?
Да, такая же любимая, как вот эти мои тут.
Ты не знала, какая она сучка?
Я не знаю, я знаю одно, что ее мама подняла большой-большой кипиш.
А муж ее?
Да я откуда знаю, там муж, нафиг оно мне надо. Вот что самое главное, чтобы ее не было здесь. Все, в Турции, чтобы ее не было, чтобы к вам претензий никто не имел.
Позвони через 20 минут. Хорошо, мой придет, мы поговорим.
Хорошо, Мария, без проблем.
Хорошо?
Да.
Давай.
Давай.
Пока.
Через 20 минут перезвонить. Фу, бля, разговор длинный.
Алло.
Алло? Ну что вы решали?
Вот, он говорит, что он тебя не доверяет. Ты ему ошибку сделал. Он не может тебе доверять. Просто он тебе не может доверять.
А ну дай мне с Катей, дайте мне с Катей поговорить.
Она сейчас не возле нас.
А где?
Она не возле нас, она, бля, в другом доме живет сейчас.
Ну,
мы одни.
Так давайте, послушай, давай встретимся вчетвером, Катя, ты, я и Апо, и посядем, нормально поговорим. Я клянусь мамой, что с моей стороны ни одного полицейского не будет. Ни одного и вообще никого. Я пришел, сели на нейтральной территории где-нибудь. Сели нормально в баре где-нибудь, сели и поговорили. Я обещаю, с моей стороны ничего не будет.
Тогда завтра зазвонимся.
Давай, я тебе завтра, значит, перезвоню.
Давай.
Господи, если она завтра придет на встречу с Катей, это все. Дадите мне рубашку с микрофоном и с камерой. И будете слушать весь разговор и видеть все, как что делается.
At this point, Katya could be anywhere in Antalya. Virel and the team decided to search for Katya in Turkey's hotel brothels and discos.
Everybody in Turkey know where the Russian discotheques are. We're full of Russian prostitutes. We went to those places with Virel, hoping to find Katya there. But Katya was not trafficked into one of those disco places. She was held in a private house.
Posing as interested clients, the crew was led to an underground brothel discreetly tucked away in a typical Turkish neighborhood. They were then taken inside one of the unmarked apartments, where trafficked women told us they were kept virtual prisoner.
They took me to a villa. They locked me in. We worked for as long as we had clients. 24 hours a day. They didn't see us as human beings, but just as whores. Just as flesh that they could use. That's all.
We serviced between 8 and 15 men a day. There were 22 girls in a 3-bedroom apartment, and each girl got beaten up at least once a day. Sometimes Turkish policemen used our services. One girl ran away and went to the police for help, but she was taken back to her pimp.
To offer some hope, the traffickers suggest to the women that they can work their way to freedom by paying back their purchase price.
Debt bondage represents the money that a girl is told she has to work off. That amount is easily inflated if the pimp wants. That way, the debt never goes away, and she continues to work without ever receiving a penny.
He said, "You'll be paid $500 a month." But the girls told me, he never pays $500 a month. He always finds a reason to fine you. For example, if a client asks you to do something and you refuse, and the client complains to the pimp, he'd charge you for a month or two, and you'd end up working for nothing.
If a trafficked woman manages to pay off her so-called debt, her pimp can then simply sell her to someone else. This creates a cycle of debt bondage from which there is almost no escape.
One pimp sells her to another, he sells her to a third, this third one to a fourth, and so on.
Tanya was sold 3 times before she realized that she had left home pregnant and was starting to show. Her new owner noticed.
My pimp said, "You're going to have an abortion." I said that I didn't want to, that I wanted to have the baby. He said if I refused, he'd make my life hell, and I'd end up with a miscarriage anyway. He forced me to have an abortion. 5 days later, I was sent to a client. You know, they just stuck a sponge inside me to stop the bleeding and sent me to work.
Алло, Мария?
Да, привет. Короче, где нам встретиться? Я, короче, с моим говорю, но ты потом ты вообще не привези, хорошо? Мы вообще не придете, я приду с тобой поговорю, хорошо?
Без проблем, Мария, без проблем.
Хорошо, тогда я тебе через 10 минут я тебе буду кидать, хорошо?
Позвонишь мне, скажешь?
Хорошо, давай.
Ну все, давай, Мария.
Давай.
The camera is this button here. Yeah, and try not to touch your shirt because there's a microphone in there as well.
If you're sitting at a table having a coffee, make sure the coffee is not in front of you on the table.
Так, немножко на сторону.
Окей, окей. Ну хорошо, я, значит, говорю, Мигрос, Макдональдс, да? Окей. Я подъеду, тебя сразу наберу.
I'm on.
Rolling?
We're rolling on hidden camera.
Okay.
Все, ты готов, дорогой.
Viorel takes a taxi. The crew trails close behind. Maria has set the meeting in a public place, a shopping mall full of tourists and affluent Turks. We follow him inside with a second camera.
Алло, в этом бургере или как он там? Шакеспеаре какой-то. Быстро. Быстро.
Ты беленькая? Что, идем присядем?
Maria's come alone, but she's afraid Viorel has brought the police.
Не переживай, успокойся, за мной никто не следил, за мной никто не следил, и со мной никого нет, можешь это не переживать.
Мы хотели с тобой нормально общаться, мы хотели Катю отвезти тебе. Я тогда с Катей вместе, мы, короче, там, души сделали.
Maria accuses Viorel of trying to get Apo and her arrested at the airport a few weeks earlier. She says a Turkish policeman confirmed this.
Это пиздеж, однозначно пиздеж. Можете подойти к этому менту, который вам это все говорил, въебать ему въебало и
Да,
при
блядь,
этом...
мы этому мента, блядь, дали $1000.
Он пиздит, я тебе отвечаю. Я... Ее отдать, просто ее. Только им ее отдаю.
As the conversation continues, Maria lets slip some surprising admissions about Katya.
А если хочешь верь, хочешь не верь, блядь, я хочу ее убить.
Ты говорю, ты шо? Даже пальцем не трогайте, потому что будет в натуре, что пиздец какой.
Вот эта Катя моего видела только 2 раза. Один раз она спала с ним, и второй раз, когда он ее на работу отправил. И все, другие отправил. Она у нас.
Ну какая разница? В том, что она, ее не видят на Украине и в Молдавии. Вот это, ты понимаешь, в чем проблема?
А мне уже даже не хочется ни жить, ничего. Заколебалась. Каждый
Я ж тебе говорю.
Проблема.
Я ж тебе говорю, а это
Нахуй
проблема.
я вышла замуж, блядь. Всегда проблема. Мне хочу нормально жить, мама.
Солнце, я тоже хочу нормально жить.
Maria promises to speak to Apo and set up a meeting between the three of them. As he waits for her call, Viorel begins to worry that Apo and Maria may simply get rid of the problem by selling Katya to another pimp. Passed on through the sex trafficking network, she could be anywhere in the world within days.
These women are being trafficked to the West. In the United States, they figure 20, 25,000 a year. But Europe is the major destination. Germany, upwards of 80,000, 40, 50,000. In the Netherlands, Spain and Italy and Turkey. All of these countries are getting trafficked women. We have laws in every country on the planet that say you can't abduct people, you can't kidnap, you can't force them into prostitution, you can't assault them. The laws are there, but they're not being enforced.
A day has passed, and Viorel still hasn't heard from Maria or Apo.
Не, никто не снимает трубку.
No answer?
Режим даже включен.
Nobody answer.
Никто не снимает. Думают они сейчас, обдумывают, что делать, как делать.
Most trafficking victims have no way out. A few escape, and some are let go when they're of no more value. But many get caught up in police raids, like this one in Antalya. What seems at first like a rescue will actually become the beginning of a new ordeal.
When the cops find them, they deport them. The police just simply bring them to the immigration authorities, and they are deported. They're re-victimized yet again by the system.
In most countries, trafficked women are treated as illegal immigrants with no access to the justice system. And the traffickers and pimps are rarely pursued.
There is no witness protection for them. Traffickers often know that they have children and use that as a threat against them. So most often the girls are not willing to testify because they're scared.
Oksana was caught in a police raid and deported back to her hometown in Ukraine. In her 8 months in captivity, she was able only once to attempt escape.
I was desperately trying to think of some way to get out. I wanted to go to the authorities, but I couldn't. I called home.
She was saying, "Mother, I can't take it anymore. Please go to the police. Maybe they can rescue me." I went to our police, and they said, didn't she know what she was going for? Meaning, she knew what she was getting into, and we don't deal with prostitutes.
"36 hours have passed. Virel is growing more suspicious that Katya has been moved or sold.
Можно, дай мне с Катей поговорить, пару слов. А где она? Кати нет.
Что значит Кати нет?
Не знаю, вот, Кати нету.
With no one returning his calls, Virel comes up with a plan to confront Maria with the undercover video from their meeting.
И запугать ее, сказать, что я с полицией сейчас. Если ты встанешь, то тебе торба. Так что позвони Апо, чтобы он привез Катю.
Don't do that yet.
Что?
Don't threaten with the tape yet.
Then he says he brings me out of the car with a tape recorder and show her, here's the evidence, we're gonna get her. You know, we're gonna get you.
Скажешь, международный агент Интерпола.
I'll say I'm an Interpol guy.
И присядешь с нами, я ей открою, скажу, посмотри. У вас все записано, на вас торба.
Basically, he says, you guys be in the car. Then he says,
Феликс, она вчера говорила ясно, я хочу ее убить. Вот так она говорила в камеру, я хочу ее убить.
Virel's plan has put the production team in an ethical bind.
I don't know if we're crossing a line. What do you guys think?
He's not exactly a rational guy at this point. He's desperate, he wants to threaten them, and he thinks it's going to work.
Frankly, I think there's more of a danger that if they see that, what's the point of giving up his wife? They'll just can hurt her.
I don't think it would accomplish anything.
I'm just worried that he puts himself in more danger. And that he ends up getting the crap eaten out of him, if not worse. And that we end up being responsible for that because we provided the materials for that.
None of this matters until Virel gets hold of Maria or Apo.
Мария, есть? Мария нету. Ты можешь ей позвонить, сказать, чтобы она мне перезвонила?
Хорошо.
Хорошо?
Хорошо.
Скажи ей только прямо сейчас, чтобы она перезвонила.
Сейчас позвоню, Апо.
Окей. Спасибо. Да раз, вонючий. Как эти турки меня достали.
Increasingly desperate, Virel cruises the streets of Antalya in the vague hope of spotting Katya. But he now fears her lost to the world of the traffickers.
Я постоянно думаю, что я ее где-то встречу по дороге, еще где-то. Видеть все рестораны, все бары, все отели, и не могу их всех проверить. Я отбил все пороги, все. Не знаю, хочу вернуть жену.
Back in Ukraine, just over a month after a sympathetic client helped free her, Tanya is struggling. She and her family lived near Chernobyl when the worst nuclear reactor accident in history took place. Now they are plagued with health problems. Her sister has a brain tumor, and her brother has chronic abdominal troubles.
The doctor said that we need a lot of money for special treatments. He said that if he doesn't get treated, we might as well order a coffin for him.
With no other way to pay just a few $100s for her brother's operations, Tanya has made a decision that's almost unimaginable to most trafficked women. to return to the country where she was held prisoner and prostitute herself.
I have no other choice. We've borrowed a huge amount of money because we didn't want to lose him. And we've been told to pay it back. If we don't, we'll be in trouble, especially our children. Anything could happen to them when we're not around. So I have to go there to earn the money. Please understand that I just want to save my brother.
Viorel finally gave up trying to reach Apo and Maria. After searching the streets of Antalya for days, he returned in despair to Tiraspol. But his persistent phone calls did have an effect. Feeling the pressure, Apo and Maria took Katya to the Antalya airport and sent her home.
Давай начинаем. Расскажи мне, как все произошло?
Как-нибудь в другой раз. Но сейчас, а не сегодня.
So many of these girls come home psychologically devastated. They come home with all kinds of medical problems, sexually transmitted diseases, they're HIV positive, they have AIDS. There's nothing for them. What does she go back to when she had serviced 10 men a night?
He said his name was Apo. I was in hysterics. A girl came in. She was a bit taller than me. She was blonde. She told me that I belonged to them and that they bought me in order to have sex with their clients. When I started to resist, she said, "You're not the first. We already had girls like you. Those girls that didn't want to do it at first, work and enjoy it now." I told her, "If you like to f Turkish men, then you f them." She slapped me and left.
Katya turned out to be a stubborn girl. A girl with attitude. Apo took a very aggressive approach to Katya. She didn't even have a chance to realize what happened to her.
They brought a man and told me if I don't satisfy him, they'll kill me. But when the man entered the room, I started fighting with him. 2 other men came in and pinned me down. They drugged me and beat me and raped me. I thought it was all over for me. They knew from the beginning that I was pregnant. Vlad knew that.
With Viorel's help, the Ukrainian police arrested Vlad and charged him with sex trafficking, setting the stage for a rare prosecution in Odessa. This was when the team first saw Vlad, as he was led into court. He has spent 1 month in custody. Now he faces up to 15 years in prison.
In the name of Ukraine, Mr. Vlad V. is accused of criminal activity. The accused is charged with finding women in the Republic of Moldova and bringing them to the city of Istanbul, Turkey, in order to sell them for the purpose of sexual exploitation.
Katya was willing to testify against Vlad, but she was not even notified of the court date.
It was very unusual. Neither VRL nor Katya were invited to court. The proceedings took about 15 minutes. The judge read the verdict and let him off the hook.
The defendant is hereby sentenced to no less than 5 years imprisonment. The accused will be released from the 5-year sentence and put on 5 years probation. Is the sentence clear to you? The court session is adjourned.
The prosecution rate is abysmal in most of these countries. The official line is exactly what you would hope it would be, which is we're doing as much as we can, we have a counter-trafficking unit, we're trying to prosecute. Is it effective?
Ну что, закончился суд. Ему дали 5 лет, условно.
Нам обещали, ему дадут 8 лет, 15 лет. Но ни в коем случае не 5 лет условно.
I guess I had a good lawyer. I'm grateful. The judge turned out to be a good guy as well. He understood my situation.
Vlad agreed to talk to us about what he'd done because he felt he had tried to do right by Katya and VRL, even if too late.
Я просто в шоке. За продажу людей, за изнасилование, за избиение, за моральный ущерб. Вот так взять просто и отпустить человека. Это уж слишком.
Because of the abuse she suffered at the hands of her traffickers, Katya had to terminate her pregnancy. The damage, she says, may never be healed. We left Vlad just after he was freed from jail in Odessa. He said he was headed back to Moldova and would not traffic again. We informed the Moldovan police about Olga. They have taken no action against her. Not long after returning to prostitution, Tanya was caught in a police raid in Turkey and deported back to Ukraine. Her little brother died a month after we filmed him.